In this video, I'll be sharing the beginning of my relationship with this Mondraker Super Foxy R. This is a 29-inch wheeled enduro bike with 160 millimeters of rear travel mated to a 170 millimeter fork. Mondraker is a brand from Elche, a town in the Alicante province of Spain, and is well known for forward geometry. Forward geometry is one of the very first campaigns to utilize longer, slacker bikes, which is a trend that today generally dominates the entire mountain bike segment. The wheelbase of this particular bike measures between 20 and 50 millimeters longer than the other bikes that have been in my recent rotation. How's that feel on the trail? Well, stay tuned. Before we do get fully started, I want to thank my personal sponsors, Jensen USA, Industry 9, PNW Components, and Remedy Supply Co. So I'm down here at the Sea Otter Classic in Monterey, California. I've been to every Sea Otter since 1996, with one exception, and that's in 2006 when I was living abroad in Spain for the year. Well, while I was studying abroad, these guys I met were starting a bike brand, and lots of folks were riding the bikes from that brand. That brand is called Mondraker. Today I picked up the Mondraker Super Foxy R. I'm extra excited because it's my daughter's favorite color, purple, and it's got this white accent. It looks stunning in real life. I'm in the neck of the woods where I first learned how to mountain bike, so I'm gonna go riding some trails that I haven't ridden much recently, but I rode a lot when I was getting into the sport. I'm back on my old commute trails in California. Haven't ridden this route in 4 years. Pretty cool to be back. 15 years ago, not many of you would be familiar with the Mondraker name. I think today that's changed. We've seen Mondraker really grow a ton. They came out with what we call forward geometry about, a dozen years ago or so. And they were really the first bike brand to largely push longer, slacker, much more aggressive geometry than what the status quo was at the time. Well, my good supporters over at Jensen USA arranged for me to borrow this bike for a bit and to do a bit of a proper review, test, experience with the Super Foxy. I have a link to the Super Foxy over at Jensen USA in the description down below. Jensen has the aluminum models available. This is the carbon one. The general geometry and suspension is the same between these models. Holy cow, this place is so different from what I remember last. Oh, this thing jumps good. The dry and dusty conditions here in California really threw me for a bit of a loop. Back home in Washington, we've been having an atmospheric river, and I'm quite used to riding slippery, wet everything. The bike was completely bone stock with massive 800 millimeter wide bars, and I was really struggling to actually move the bike around as much as normal. After a full day at a trade show, I wasn't quite on my A game anyhow. The next day was going to be quite a surprise. 45 degrees outside. Hard to tell, but it's a little wet out here. I grew up only a few miles from these trails here, so as a kid, I would constantly ride out here, either with my friend, his dad, or by myself, and put in laps in the forest in my old Mondraker, and I loved riding out here, but I really loved my BMX bike, and whenever it was raining, I couldn't ride my BMX bike at the jumps because the jumps didn't hold up to ride in the rain. However, the forest, it's a forest, not a desert. In the forest, I could get away with riding quite a bit in the rain. So for a long time, I rode more here in the rain than in the dry. Quick update, it's raining even more than back at the parking lot. Right here is one of my original Tech Climb challenge lines from back in the day. Wonder if we can do it in the wet. Guys, I'm having some technical difficulties with the GoPro. It turns on and then it just falls right down. I think it got too wet, which has never happened back home in Washington. And here we are in Santa Cruz, California, and it's too wet for the GoPro. Hard to see on video, but we got a bunch of wild turkeys right there. Wildlife viewing. What up, turkey? Hard to see, I know. They got good camouflage. Camouflage and size are like their two defenses. You gotta do something when you're delicious. This right here is one of my all-time favorite trails. I remember when we had to hike our bikes right here because it was a secret off-the-map trail. Now it's been adopted in and made public and legal and all that. I have a lot of good memories on this trail. I've done a lot of really dumb stuff on this trail, like no brakes, way too fast, right next to redwood trees, sketchy gaps, jumps, weird lines. I was really hoping today to get a good GoPro of going down that, but again, the gimbal is not working. And I have no way to hold the GoPro without the gimbal working. And just like that, it's time to get home to the Pacific Northwest. It's pretty rare I've got a bike box taped up with TSA tape, and that I've got a brand new bike that I've already ridden. But today's not any other day. Hopefully this bike survived the economy budget flight from California up here to Washington. Hopefully. I would be really bummed if anything terrible happened to it, because this bike is cool. Awesome. Even dirtier than I remember. And the stock pedals, which are really good. My plan for today is to throw on my usual parts on here. I run a P&W Components cockpit with bars and the width I'm used to. I'm gonna use a P&W 35 mil stem, P&W grips, and another big change is the P&W seat post. This stock post seems to work fine, but it doesn't go down very low. It only goes down like 150 or something, or even 125. Full disclosure, I'm not super thrilled on the dropper line routing. It comes down the down tube and then up one of those spars on the side of the shock and then out, and you can see how kinked it is brand new. The seat tube runs down to right here, and it's capped right there, so it's a very short seat tube because the shock's in the way. I will mention that Mondraker is speccing DH casing tires on here, which is fantastic. While these tires are pretty heavy, you can trust them. They will not flat. Now the complete bike weight, with pedals and everything, 35 pounds or so. Just a touch heavier than some of my other bikes, but these tires are a bit more beefy than the other tires I'm running. And finally, time to get the bike on some trails that I know and love. Let's warm up with some slalom. The bike's big, I do notice that. I notice more than anything is the seat height, but it's a different topic for a different day. Let's go ride some more stuff. In particular, I was looking forward to trying out this bike on some more traditional bike parky style mountain bike jumps. Luckily, these trails have plenty of those. It's a lot of bike to put in the air and control. Kind of loses speed quickly too. Oh, this bike's kind of a lot. These jumps are quite a bit bigger than the ones we just did. But it'd be interesting to see how a bike this big actually does jump. You have to go kind of fast compared to normal because the thing's so big. Oh! Almost! Jeez! Oh, that jump is scary. Oh, I've ridden a lot of new bikes, and one thing I've noticed is that for the first few rides on any new bike, especially one that's drastically different than what you're used to, well, there's a learning curve. So the bigger bike is kind of cool, but it's a lot to handle in the air. Whoa, can't wheelie through that turn. A little bit of behind the scenes info is that this riding footage is filmed with a GoPro Hero 8 mounted directly to my chest harness. I'm not using a regular gimbal like I do in all the rest of my videos. Reason for this? Well, the seat post doesn't go low enough to get the seat out of the way of my gimbal. And look, you can still see how close the saddle is to my GoPro pretty often on this trail. Let's make sure we hit a quick climb challenge, and then let's go hit some more trail. Almost immediately, I noticed the bike felt really good when trail speeds got above about 15 miles per hour. Once you're going a little bit quick like that, when you start hitting the rough stuff, the roots, if there's any rocks or braking bumps or bomb holes on the trail, the bike does track very straight. At the same time, the suspension does a decent job of allowing me to pop down and push down and get the bike off the ground and hop over things. However, being such a long bike, the way you handle it through that stuff is kind of different than the rest of my mountain bikes. Oh, it's hard to absorb those landings with the seat so high. Also, you've all probably guessed this already, but when the trail starts to get steep, well, the Mondraker keeps asking for more. My arms and hands are less tired than normal. I will give this bike that. I'm going for that gap, which I don't normally do. You can see this bike being a weapon in a bike park. Like I mentioned, getting used to any bike is always a little bit of a quest. After some more time spent dialing in the suspension, I needed to run a little bit more sag than I had initially, and I opened up the damping a little bit more. I took the bike back out to the jumps again. This time I did again try to use the gimbal, and you can tell how much smoother the footage is. Nice. Feels better today, I don't know why. Over clear. Perfect. Does feel better. Feels a lot better. Cool. I tweaked only a couple of small things on this bike, but it made a really big difference. Feels a lot better. Having the fork a little bit stiffer. Front end felt too low before, now it's higher. Spot on. And then in back, just a touch more sag. More balance. Then rolling the bars forward. Okay, this is steps in the right direction. I kind of think what really matters is I've ridden this bike a few more days, and with every ride, you get more familiar with the bike. It's more intuitive what it's gonna do, and that is what makes the real difference. I had a few more days until I could get Logan out on the trails with me, so I went ahead and did what I know how to do best. Simply ride the bike way too much. Good morning, boys and girls. We're here at an intermediate flow trail. Yes! Having a tough time modulating this code brake. It's I'm so used to the Shimano system. A lot of folks love codes, but I haven't quite found my groove with them yet. Still a little bit of a wheelie. As of today, I've got 9 days with the Mondraker Super Foxy R. I've ridden it most of those days. I probably have at least 6 rides on this thing. It's definitely a very different bike than what I've been riding, gosh, the last couple of years here. The number one thing I notice about this bike is it's very, very big. Big to the point that I wonder, is it gonna fit in the trail? I wonder, am I gonna make this turn? And it takes a lot of intensity to get it through the corners and stuff. Now, that's my perspective being here in the Pacific Northwest. For bike park stuff, that could be pretty darn good. The biggest hang-up, by far, is the seat post situation. I'm gonna invest some more time in hunting for other options for a dropper post, and I'm gonna try some hacks here to see if we can make this work just a little bit better, because by far, I want to ride this thing more, and I keep running out of real estate to move my body around. I ride low down to the bike. I've got a very low crouched position, and I'm somewhat rearwards, but on this bike I have to weight the front end a little bit more, so I'm more forwards, but still, with how forward the geometry is on this bike, see what I did there? The seat ends up being where I want to be. Today we came out to one of the most bike parky places to ride a mountain bike where I live. On this local trail thing, you can actually shuttle it. We didn't, we pedaled up like real people, but I figured this trail had a higher average trail speed than a lot of the other stuff I've been riding in town, so it'd be a good fit for the Super Foxy. It was raining pretty good all night and into the morning, and while we never really got completely drenched, it was pretty wet and soupy. Now, with the long wheelbase, when things are that slippery, it kind of works to your advantage, because if you're starting to slip and slide, you're still gonna go in generally the same direction. On the flip side, if you need to correct, you can't. So you're kind of along for the ride should something happen and bump you off the preferred line and into a tree or something. Also, with how high that seat is, I've got a harder time hopping the bike from line to line, and my riding style has kind of evolved so that if I'm in a line and then it ends and there's a weird route or a tombstone or something, I'll just bunny hop and hop the bike over to the other side of the trail to someplace smooth and safe. A lot harder to do that on this bike than on the other handful of bikes I've been riding. Now, I'm 5'8", 174 centimeters tall. Every single bike I've ridden in the last 5 years has been a size medium. Today we found a couple of really cool features. One that stands out in particular, there is this downed log. See, it's not a tree, it's a log once it falls over. And I thought it'd be cool to ride up and bunny hop right over it. It'd just be such a cool line. Someone really good could probably fast plant over it and it would look sweet. Fortunately, I can't fast plant, so I tried to bunny hop over it. Tried it twice on the Super Foxy, and it was scary, downright scary. The bike is pretty hard to bunny hop. I think that comes from the general length. I ended up just grabbing the Occam, which I haven't ridden in at least 2 or 3 weeks, and first try, made it over cleaner than on the Super Foxy. So that just goes to show, this is indeed the complete opposite of the kind of bikes I normally gravitate towards. Once we get away from the geometry talk, the nuts and bolts of the bike are actually really good. Visually, the bike is quite striking. It's got a gorgeous appearance. The industrial design, A+, it looks phenomenal. Build quality seems pretty decent too. I haven't had any weird bolts coming loose or anything. The way the suspension works, it's honestly pretty good. We found a little jump into a corner that Logan says is his favorite feature in the entire state of Washington. And I went ahead and attempted it, and it was hard on this because you got to turn the bike in the air and pivot it.
Have you ever ridden a bike with a 17-foot wheelbase?
Oh, feels like a DH.
It is a DH bike.
I asked Logan to give it a shot, and he was very brave and sent it and did a fine job of pivoting the bike slightly in the air and landing slightly more naturally than I did.
Yeah, the dropper is tough, huh?
I like took off and I was like, oh!
Yeah.
Like I couldn't.
Pedaling, there's no weird bobbing or anything with the suspension. And traction-wise, it seems fine. It seems totally fine. I would like to play around with it more, but because I can't move around on the bike with that long seat post, I haven't really dove into changing the rear end setup a whole lot more. If you talk to someone with a monster truck riding style, this would be an incredible option to go. It seems like the ownership experience would be good. If you're someone that's very active on the bike, with a BMX background maybe, you might want to look towards something a little bit smaller, and that's fine. I'm glad we have options for all the cool different places that we get to ride mountain bikes. I just wrapped up the second day of filming with Logan here on the Mondraker Super Foxy R, and things are looking up. So, I didn't want to do this yesterday because this is not a realistic thing you're going to want to deal with every day, but I went ahead and manually loosened the seat collar and dropped that little 125 dropper, slammed it all the way down in the seat mast. Wow, that made a big difference. That lowered it about another 50 millimeters, about 2 inches or so, and this bike is coming alive. First thing we did, we hit some dirt jumps just to kind of warm up and loosen up a little bit. I've hit these jumps a couple times with the seat at the previous low height, and I even hit them with the suspension before I had it totally dialed in. I was really struggling at first. So the wheelbase on this bike is so much longer than the other bikes I've been riding, like the Ripmo or the Evil Offering, or even the Yeti SB130 or the Orbea Occam, the Ripley AF. So with how long this bike is, the way it actually, the mechanics of getting it into the air off those steeper, bigger transitions, it's totally different. And it's taken me about a week to adjust to it. But when that seat's been lowered down, I can actually move around enough to work with this wheelbase on the jumps. And I really started to relax a ton. And you can probably see from the footage how much more comfortable I look and how much more I can do on the bike when I'm getting through the jumps. So the bike started to feel really good at the first set of jumps, good enough that I thought I would maybe just pop on over to the big jumps in town and see how it would feel over there. My friend Hannah was nice enough to tow me through the set. The first time I ever hit those jumps, I was following Hannah, and she's an absolute shredder. So today we weren't hitting the last jump because it was really sandy in the transition between the second to last and the last one, and that would suck down your speed. The Mondraker lets you keep up with actual pros. And you do not want to case a 40-foot long, 15-foot tall double. Even with a big bike like this, I didn't want to be a human guinea pig in that scenario. So anyhow, you can see how stiff I was in the first few runs. I haven't hit those jumps since we had the Rocky Mountain Slayer here in town like a full year ago. But this thing was feeling good enough that I thought it made sense to try the big bike on the big jumps. Wore my big helmet, sent it. So the thing actually felt pretty good. I had to work to get enough speed to clear everything, whereas Hannah was actually braking in front of a bunch of the jumps. Both her and Tilly mentioned that the jumps were going really fast. They might have been going really fast, but I had to work pretty hard on this bike to get through them, and I think that is just getting used to the longer wheelbase. Those jumps aren't as lippy as the smaller ones, so mechanics are a little bit different. But at the end, I made it through a bunch of times and felt, for jumps that make me pretty nervous, I felt pretty confident riding this thing through there. So yeah, bike park status with the saddle dropped down like we have it. That's a huge important factor. Bike park status, this thing would be a lot of fun. I would love to hit a bunch of the stuff at Whistler on this. I'm already thinking like a bike like this would make things like crabapple hits be pretty fun, A-line, freight train, all those trails. I also wanted to try filming the Mondraker on one of my favorite little local trails. It's a bit tighter and a bit more like traditional. It's not just like a man-made flow trail with berms everywhere. It's also got a lot of roots, and we hit roots yesterday and in the rain, but these roots are a little bit different. And with the saddle down, you can do so much more with manipulating the bike. It is a whole different world. So yes, I am frustrated that came with a 125 dropper and doesn't have space for running anything longer that I had in my garage. I'm gonna do some research and see what other options are available out there. I know I'm a PNW sponsored athlete. I would love to run a PNW post on here, but it won't fit. So I'm gonna take some measurements and see if maybe a reverb or perhaps one-up component seat post might actually fit on here and give us what we need, you know, about 170 or so mils a drop. That would be really cool. Found one really cool manual line, and I wanted to just manual around this corner and jump into this rock roll, but I was scary, really scary, because if you mistime your jump in, bad things could happen, and I'm still not totally used to this bike, but I got it close enough that I'm happy with it. This thing started to really open up and just feel like it could carry speed like really well through all the routes. The downside to that, tight corners are definitely a chore. I'm starting to feel more comfortable with kicking the back end through and doing little cutties, but I find myself doing more cutties on this than I would do on other bikes, and that's, in my opinion, more effort and slower than just carving corners.
Oh, hard to make that turn.
If you do have a real tight corner that you can't even cutty, this is a big bike to squeeze through there. For like a bike park or, you know, bigger, faster trails, this is a great way to go. For tighter, more natural trails, something like that Rocky Mountain Altitude that has this kind of travel, a little bit more conservative wheelbase and reach, kind of works to my style a little bit better. So it depends on where you live and how you ride and what you're riding, but you can make a case for either bike. I've got a link in the YouTube description below over to the Jensen USA website to the listing of this Mondraker Super Foxy R. Anything you purchase from Jensen, including a Mondraker, will definitely help support my channel. That's a big part of how we make these videos happen. Everyone, give a big thanks to Logan for filming, and also a big thanks to Industry 9, PNW Components, of course Jensen, and Remedy Supply Co. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the red subscribe button. Tell your friends about it. If they're curious about what a big wheelbase bike would ride like, they might want to watch this video, so share it with them. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.